Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to our very first session to this peer-to-peer summer series with New Bedford Creative. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jasmyn Baird. I am the Senior Creative Fellow with New Bedford Creative. So I'm really glad that you guys are all here today. So this series is geared to enrich, educate, and connect New Bedford creatives in our community. New Bedford is home of artists, entrepreneurs, change makers, etc. And so this session or this series is to embrace the pulse that makes New Bedford so unique, while also expanding our knowledge and our connections. So at this time, I do want to thank MassDevelopment, TDI, and also the Barr Foundation for funding this program. This session or this series is one component of a broader TDI Creative Cities Initiative, and it helps to boost art-based economic development. We'll be recording the sessions part of today, not the Q&A, and all the recordings will live on our YouTube. Within the week, we'll be able to upload it. So if you miss something, if you have to go to the bathroom, get a drink or something, well, we have it recorded and we have you covered. So without further ado, it seems like most people are here now. So I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Dawn Salerno. Dawn is the executive director of the Rotch-Jones-Duff House and Garden Museum. And today she'll focus on grant writing and finding, Ready, Set, Grant. And so I'm gonna pass it over to you, Dawn. I'll go ahead and make you the host.
Sure, thank you, Jasmyn.
Yeah.
And thanks everyone for being here. I hope to at least answer one of your questions today. I actually thought to that end, it would help me. I know some of you, but I don't necessarily know what kind of grant you're working on. So if we could start by just using the chat, and in the chat, give me a word or two that describes your experience level with grant writing. How would you describe your own experience level? None, moderate, pretty good, excellent. Just throw that in the chat so I can see what you think your level of experience is with grant writing. Okay, one word, two words, pretty good, excellent, I hate it, I'm terrible, whatever you want to say. And then while you're doing that, I'm just going to ask a few people if you want to unmute to, if that's okay, to unmute and tell me what kind of grant, or what kind of thing are you trying to fund right now? And if you're just here to get more information, you don't actually have a project, that's fine. You don't have to say anything. But like if you were to ask me at the RJD, what kind of grants do I look to get? I would say, well, I look for usually two kinds. One are preservation grants for the building. The other are usually programmatic, running programs, something to do with people. So does anyone want to share just in literally a sentence, what are you looking to fund right now?
Same as you are.
Right, I figured Paul, thank you. So Paul and I write a lot of the same grants for the same purposes. True, preservation of an old building. Anyone else? Maybe one of the artists, yeah, Rhonda.
Hi, yeah, I'm looking for, I'm very successful at writing local cultural council grants all over the state of Massachusetts. I'm looking to move beyond the state of Massachusetts and look for other state funded grants, even national. Okay,
great. One other person that maybe hasn't, looking for a different kind of funding than what was already mentioned, building funding for, and Rhonda's an artist and she does a lot of programming in the community.
Sure. I'll jump in. I'm writing grants to fund Practice Best Practice, which is another workshop series we're doing here in the area, and I'm also writing grants for a project I'm doing with Parabola Stance for my photography.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to try to address that type of funding, the range that you've mentioned. And if you want to just use the chat, I'm going to move forward in my presentation, but just use the chat if you want to share one thing you want to learn in today's workshop, throw that in the chat. and I'm just gonna keep moving forward. So as a little bit of background, besides my role here at the RJD, I do write grants now, but I've also been reviewing grants for many years. So I started writing grants in my early career for the organization I was working for. I have worked in arts organizations as well as now this history organization, but I've been reviewing grants at the national level, at the state level in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and at the local level. I have some involvement here in New Bedford. So, so I hope to, share some knowledge or help you in a problem today. I'm going to just go through some tips, and my focus, because there's going to be several subsequent workshops on grants, is really preparing for the grant application. So once you get to the application, it's all writing, right? And you got a deadline, you got several sections to put together. Some of this preparation will help you with, like, you'll develop a bank of information. Some of this might be, quote, boilerplate information. And then what I can guide you through is the kind of best practice for setting up that bank of information, so that when it gets to, application number 1 for the state of Massachusetts, you're pulling from some of that bank. And every single time you're not reinventing the wheel because you've got this bank, or you've been building it up along. It's not always the same information, but now it's the most current information, and you're just pulling from that preparation, and you're ready for your grant. So it makes the grant application itself the easiest part if you're doing all these preparatory steps. So I'm just going to share my screen. I've just got a few slides to kind of talk me through, to walk us through. So on your mark, get set, grant was my title. So in preparing for your grants, for your grant writing, keep your information current. What do I mean by your information? If you're a single artist, if your business is your own artwork, your artist business, it could be your resume, your bio, your personal social pages. If you're an organization, it's going to be your website for your organization, your own social pages for your organization. And I'm putting up a not best practice example. I just pulled this today from this website. I think they're in Oregon, and they're a railway museum. They're probably pretty darn cool. But this post looks like it's from November 2020. They're canceling their Santa's Engine House starting December 3rd, right? It sounds like that they've, that it is December. So, sometimes grants will have you list your website. Sometimes that's part of the review process. Sometimes it's just a reviewer that decides, you know what, I want to learn a little more about Rhonda. I'm going to go check out her social pages. So you want to make sure that those are in order, that you have a current bio. If you just got an award, make sure that's up on your LinkedIn page or whatever. Gathering data. I don't know that anyone loves gathering data. I work with somebody that actually loves data, but it's rare that you like gathering data. But it does help you, and almost every grant requires it. So the kind of data I'm talking about is if you're in the application itself, they may ask you something as simple as, how many people do you plan to serve? And what do you know about those people? So this could be audience data, your potential audience. It could be the impact that you hope to have. So if you're running an early childhood education program, what impact is your program going to have on those 4-year-olds? What are they going to learn? This is the kind of data I mean, and I'm going to break it out between like numbers and research. So if you've run programs in the past, hopefully you've kept data. So how many people came to that workshop? When you had the open house at the Arnold Mansion, how many people came to that program? Who were they? Where were they coming from? Were they local? Were they tourists? What's your demographic is the common term, right? So this is just a poll from the Mass Humanities grant. It's a grant that I wrote a year ago, but it just shows you audience outreach was the question. How will you reach your project's intended audience? And if you don't know who your intended audience is, think about it, because most grants are going to ask you, who does this benefit? Why are we giving you money? Because it's going to, obviously with with me and Paul, we're putting on a new roof or something, but those grants will still ask you, who does your building benefit, right? So think about that and present it in numbers as best possible. Objective, numbers are always objective. So you can just see how I added in, you know, a lot of data about our subscribers to our marketing, our followers on Facebook. The very last question, which I think you can barely see, is total anticipated audience for deliverables. Deliverables is a very granty term. It just means what's your product? What are you going to produce with this grant money? You know, is your deliverable a program, an artwork, an exhibition, a new roof? So gather data. The other kind of data can be research on your audience. So that early childhood education program, there are probably national studies that can give you statistics on the benefits of early childhood education, right? Or the benefits of arts in high school, you know, for retention of students in school. So, you know, lower dropout rates for students that are enrolled in music classes. This is the kind of national research you can add into a grant. This is the bank of information you're building up. So are you in the arts? You want to look for these studies. Some of them are national. They might be geographically specific. They might be focused on a certain audience. Look for that kind of data. Documentation is a kind of data, right? But I'm breaking this out as 3 separate things. Documentation, photos. You see on the left, we took lots of photos during our Black in Business event. Now, this was really use of the RJD's property, but it was a raging success, I think. I think the person that ran it was very happy, lots of people. So we wanted to just photographically capture the success of that event. So you can certainly take a lot of photos if you are having a program. You could even take a photo of a rotting roof if you need to send documentation of that sort. Seek out testimonials. So don't wait for people to come to you and say, this was a really great program. You can actually poll people. You know, Paul and I know each other. We write recommendation letters for each other because we know that person has experience in our organization. So, you know, do you have a regular student that has been back to multiple programs? See if they'll write you a testimonial. Something as simple as, you know, why did you choose our organization, or why did you choose this particular class, or what difference has it made in your life? You know, prompt them with a question, and then you might get this kind of testimonial that's up on the screen here. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't have written one better. That's just perfect for us. Where is this useful in a grant application? In a place like what you see below there. I think this is from the Mass Cultural Council. I forget which application this is. It's just a snapshot. When they ask you potentially for optional attachments, you'll see it at the bottom. Optional, always use the optional. Always attach something when it says optional. You might attach an additional, like a newsletter if you're an organization. Maybe you throw in a photo of, you know, 2 smiling children after class or in the middle of class. Use those optional attachments. So that's where something like documentation can be helpful. And also, assuming you write that grant, you're gonna have a grant report due. So in the grant report, very often they'll say, is there anything else you'd like to send with your grant report? You know, photos, press, save it all, submit it all. So this is and I have five total preparations that I recommend. You're going to get to a point where you're researching your grant prospects. And so I'm going to give you some resources at the end. My last slide is just a selection of grants that I myself have used or applied for. It's certainly not an exhaustive list, but it'll get you started. And maybe there's one you haven't heard of on the list. I'm sure future presenters will have lists as well. So when you start to research, I started this Excel sheet where I listed the ones I was actually going to apply to, and some that I didn't. If there's nothing in the field, it's because I actually didn't apply to them. But then you want to track your deadlines and what the status is. You know, did you submit it online? I mean, I know this is time consuming, but If you're researching the grant prospects, you're going through that work anyway, so just write it down. Maybe your Excel sheet only has 4 things on it. So you'll have your resources ready. You'll know yearly, because I know some of you have been doing this for years. I just go back to this and I say, oh wait, what month is it? Okay, you know, in 2 months, it's gonna be time for the LCC grants to start those. So this is, once it's done, it's like a rolling, every year you go back to this document. So this is just what I developed for a schedule. In researching your grant prospects, make sure you're eligible. This is a waste of your time if you're not eligible. The biggest division is between individuals and organizations. So some of the grant prospects I'm going to give you are for artists specifically. Some are not for individuals at all, but organizations. Some are for both. MCC, Mass Cultural Council, has grants for both organizations and individuals. Make sure you're eligible. They usually say that right up front, or they make you fill out an eligibility. And actually, I think everyone in this Zoom is eligible, given what you're doing. You don't all have to be organizations. You don't necessarily have to be a 501c3, but that's very common. Okay, so next, set up your support system. So what I mean is take a workshop like this, learn more about grants. So kudos to you all, because you're here. Find a proofer. If that was something that was like a real enlightenment for me. I have somebody just read through my grant and they catch typos. I'm a pretty good writer, but sometimes they're like, this sentence didn't make any sense to me, because I was using some kind of jargon. And you're in it so much, you're in your own head so much about whatever you're doing, you don't realize like you're not making sense to the average person that's not in your head, that doesn't know your program. Your grant has to make sense to Joe Schmo. Have your aunt read it, you know? Does it make sense to your aunt? I mean, I'm not seriously recommending that, but some kind of objective reader. And, you know, there are workshops like this. The last thing that is potentially a helpful support is that some grant agencies offer their own readers. So I'm not aware of any right now, but some will read over a draft, and you always want to take advantage of that, because the grant agency themselves will say, you know, I read through your grant, this part's weak, you want to make sure you add that, da, 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 da. And it's brilliant, and it can really help you win a grant. So with that, I just want to share my 5 tips for a better application, assuming now you're at your grant application. We've got a few more minutes. We're just going to go through Dawn's 5 tips. 1, individualize each application. Did I spell that wrong? So individualize. That looks like it's spelled wrong. So I just said, like, build up a bank of information, right? Some of it might be boilerplate, but just be careful, because if you, for example, put something like Dawn has 10 years of experience and you use that for the next 5 years, that means by year 5, I have 15 years of experience and I haven't updated my Dawn has 10 years of experience. So you still want to customize, use that boilerplate for efficiency, but make sure you don't miss something key like that, or a reference to some, you know, some dated item. Be honest about what you do. Don't invent something just to get money. I think organizations do this more than individuals. Individuals, you're always very honest about what you do, but don't create work for yourself. Fund what you already do. Find the grant that will fund you for what you're already doing, and only apply when you're eligible, right? This is my big thing, because I'm a writer. I'm not a creative writer. I'm like a grant writer, but please write objectively, clearly, and concisely. I think you're going to help. If this is not your style of writing, it's going to be really tough for you. For example, you could write, you know, Dawn is an amazing teacher who makes beautiful artworks. That's not as powerful as saying, Dawn won Teacher of the Year in 2020, and several of her students have gone on to art school. You know, there's a difference there, because everyone's gonna say that their teachers are amazing, or their artwork is amazing, or that they do great programs. I need to know, well, who else thinks that? So show me objective facts. Another example, you know, this great program is a fabulous opportunity for students who will be enrolled because of it, or enriched because of it. Instead of that, maybe something like, students enrolled in this program will receive 120 hours of quality arts programs not otherwise available to them during the normal school day. okay? Something very specific. You're identifying like a need, why you present this value. You're going to have word limits on these things. I'm sure you've encountered that. So just be careful, because sometimes they cut you off and they don't warn you that you're going to have a truncated grant if you go over the word limit. So you could write everything in WordPerfect, count the words, or some word processing, count your words, and then cut and paste it over. And then honor the deadline. Don't procrastinate. I did this. This was not like a procrastinating, but I misunderstood a deadline. Paul, my nightmare story for the CPA grant. Every grant deadline is midnight, usually. You know, the deadline is this day at midnight. And I was so used to that. I read this grant quickly. It was actually noon, 12 p.m. they wanted the grant. And I read it so quickly. I was like, oh, it's at midnight. So I missed the grant deadline. And for a whole year, I missed out on, you know, potentially thousands of dollars of money from this grant just because of that simple mistake. So you don't want to miss a deadline, because a lot of them are pretty hard and fast. They will not bend on that. And last, proof. This is where your aunt will help you proofreading. Typos, grammar, you know, those boilerplate things, make sure nothing got cut off. Acronyms spelled out, attachments actually attached. And I even go back and I click on the attachment in the grant to make sure it's really there. Because you might have uploaded it, but it didn't actually upload. So you really have to go through these things with a fine-tooth comb. So with that, I just want to remind you that granting agencies are here to give you money. That's what they want to do. That's their mission. They want to give you money. So, so all you need to do is really find the right match for yourself. These are just my select list of granting agencies. Again, it's not an exhaustive list at all. I was thinking if we could combine all the lists you get for them future presenters, you'll have like a real comprehensive list. So I'm glad to share this however we figure out to share it, but I'm going to stop the screen share right now so that we can kind of open up for questions. Okay, so, and I'm going to see what questions are in the chat. Oop, there's my timer.
Perfect time.
Yeah, right. Well, I was
Seriously.
watching. So I don't see any questions in the chat. So, and this is now, we're into Q&A time. So, and Jasmine, I'm going to turn hosting back over to you too. So does
Perfect,
anyone want
thank
to
you.
open up with some questions for each other too? Because there's a lot of grant knowledge already here.
Rhonda had mentioned in the chat to briefly discuss budgeting, if you have any tips on that.
I just saw that, talk about budgeting. I guess first, look and see if your grant has a template budget, because then you can just follow their template. If there's no template, I tend to use an Excel format because it'll add up the numbers for you. But other than that, you know, a nice grid look. And if you're not used to budgeting, I would keep the line items as simple as possible. Keep it to fewer line items. You know, don't break out like microphone stand, microphones, Just put it all in equipment, you know, lump things together. So Rhonda, you're an artist. I could imagine it being like, you know, supplies are always going to be separate from your honorarium. So honorarium supplies. So you can set up the key things that you're going to need in your budget. Some budgets will allow for overhead. Many don't, unfortunately, which is unfortunate. I think the average, you can look to see if your grant, and since you're going for national grants, there might be rules about what you can include in a budget. Always read what you can include in a budget. So the grant will tell you, you know, overhead not allowed, food not allowed. So there's that kind of the do's and don'ts of what you can put in a budget. And then I would just recommend, I don't know, what other tips? If you don't have actual prices, it gets a little tricky for the grantor to trust that, you know, how did you get that number? Where did that number come from? They're all rounded. Like that's always a suspicious budget, you know. If it just says honoraria, $5,000, I'm like, is that one honorarium for one person? Or is that five and 1,000 for 5 people? So explain, And it doesn't have to be a huge explanation. It can be like honorarium, 5 at 1,000, 5 artists, you know, and then you just 5,000. So that's called an extension, right? You just show like what the actual, how the bigger number breaks down.